How people vote in an election certainly can be affected by peers, friends, family, and neighbors. That's also true with some of our economic choices and what we buy. Tonight, economics correspondent Paul Solman explores how those forces could potentially be marshaled for other constructive purposes. It's part of our regular series, Making Sense.
The man in the middle is the hidden camera subject. He has just arrived from an employment agency.
50 years ago, Alan Funt made an X-rated film, okay, tame by today's standards, using the hidden camera technique pioneered on his TV show, Candid Camera.
What do you say to a naked lady?
Now the test is progressing.
In this bit, an unsuspecting job applicant arrives for an interview. Fellow applicants in the waiting room, Funt's undercover Confederates, start disrobing. Sure enough,
People will follow obediently.
economist Robert H. Frank calls this peer pressure-like phenomenon behavioral contagion.
There it is.
But it doesn't just lead to humiliation
Are you ready?
or explain the bad outcomes of mob behavior. In fact, he thinks, behavioral contagion could be a key to solving our most pressing problems, even climate change.
Shifts in public opinion occur very rapidly, very unpredictably, and it's because what I think about something depends on what people around me think about it.
Do hereby pronounce you.
Consider same-sex marriage, says Frank. 20 years ago, just 1 out of 10 Americans supported it. Today, a solid 2/3 majority is in favor. Frank's new book, Under the Influence, Putting Peer Pressure to Work, argues that behavioral contagion can be a force for environmental good.
Concern about position.
It's an about-face, seeing as how he's been writing for decades about how keeping up with or ahead of the Joneses has been an economic plague. Luxury Fever, published in 1999, explained a decade in which house sizes doubled compared to homes in the 1950s, SUV sales quadrupled.
The reason we buy such heavy cars, the reason we build such big houses, is that other people like us have begun doing that.
Even tiny Trumansburg, New York, near Cornell University, where Frank teaches, has its share of McMansions.
That was built in 2007. It is approximately 4,200 square feet.
Par for the course, says realtor Lindsay Hart.
That's what people want.
And why do they want it?
The people at the top led this charge, and they did what people do in every stratum. They build bigger when they have more money.
And as these bigger homes were being built, I think that's pushed up the standard for the average square footage of a home and what people want.
So the norm just shifted upwards.
Luxury fever, financially dicey, environmentally damaging, as bigger houses and vehicles absorb more resources to build, more energy to run. But look, says Bob Frank, since we're hardwired to take our cues from others, why not put behavioral contagion to good use? And we can, he says.
The contagion works in both directions. The rise in SUV ownership was explosive. Some bought them, others felt compelled to do likewise. When some abandon them, the decline in SUV ownership will be just as explosive.
The trend is now smaller homes.
In the same local development where McMansions once bloomed, however, the latest model is half the size, reflecting a nationwide trend. Is it chic to own a smaller home now?
It's definitely not seen as a negative. So I guess chic would be a good word for it.
That's right. It costs much less to heat a small home than a big one, but the more important effect is the influence that they have on others.
Consider those solar panels, says Frank.
I see my neighbor put on a solar panel on his roof. Well, maybe he knows something I don't know. And before you know it, there's a nucleus in our neighborhood. We've all got solar panels.
Well, not exactly. Bob Frank wanted to put solar panels on his roof, but the house didn't get enough sun. There was, however, an alternative. Buying panels in a solar farm, an array that doesn't power his house directly, but feeds electricity into the local grid.
I don't think I want to call myself a solar power magnate, but I own a share of it.
This is a map of most of the installations we've done.
Joe Sliker runs Renovus, a solar energy firm in Ithaca that counts Bob Frank as a customer.
This is Ithaca here.
Yeah, this is Ithaca in the center area.
The point is, when you zoom into downtown,
You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different customers just within that 2-block area.
And outside of town, peer pressure also seems to work.
5, all within about 3 blocks of each other.
And even in the woods.
There's one customer that could have solar on Hinging Post Road, and that's where it started. And then the neighbors all tried to get it and couldn't.
Because it's too shaded?
It's too shaded, yep. But these customers have all put their panels on solar farms instead.
Do the neighbors brag to each other?
Yeah, oh, it's a keeping up with the Joneses thing, for sure.
Keeping up with their economizing too, another aspect of peer pressure.
The cost of solar in the last 7 years has dropped by about 80%. At this point, solar is the cheapest form of electricity that you can get.
Of course, all this depends on having enough peers.
The 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Enter Kevin Bacon.
The idea is that any actor, alive or dead, can be connected to me through our work in 6 steps or less. And I'm going to give you an example. Rudolph Valentino in 1922 was in Beyond the Rocks with Gertrude Astor, who did Daddy Longlegs in 1955 with James Cromwell, who was in Beyond All Boundaries in 2009 with me. That gives Rudolph Valentino a Bacon number of 3.
The fact that we are vastly more closely connected to one another than anyone ever imagined really is the heart of why we influence one another so strongly.
So then, buying smaller cars or houses, putting up solar panels, will behavioral contagion alone save us? Don't we need policy as well to rescue the Earth?
Yes, we should charge people for discharging CO2 into the atmosphere, just as economists have said forever. What's new in the story is that the effect of doing that will be vastly bigger than anyone imagines. That's a whole area that's ripe for progress in economics.
And it's happening. Increasingly, electric bills show how your usage compares to the neighbors. And in a case of corporate contagion, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Starbucks have all recently made big pledges to cut their carbon emissions. One last question, though. If Bob Frank's own roof is panel-free, how can he be the pro-social typhoid Mary who positively infects his neighbors?
Thanks a lot, Joe.
Turns out he just had to do what he learned from this story. Put up a sign that he's gone solar too. With panels down on the farm, even more cost-efficient there, by the way, than on his house. For the PBS NewsHour, correspondent Paul Salman from in and around Ithaca, New York.